Welcome to Logic for the month of February. A beautiful time of the year. Had a great Mardi Gras. Easter's coming. I think the chance of a freeze has passed. I hope so. I planted my tomatoes a couple of days ago. Get my fingers crossed that we have no more frost, but looks like things are budding out. So beautiful time of the year. Dave Dixon is chairman of the Dredge Vermilion group, who's fought valiantly for the last 6-7 years to prevent a flood like we had in 2016 from reoccurring. And bit by bit, we are making progress and making improvements. We're far from at 100%, but we've had some victories. We've had some things done that is making a difference, will make a significant difference if such event comes back to us again. So Dave, welcome. Welcome to the
Thank you, Harold. Today we're going to be presenting a update on the status of some of the projects we've been working on. Not 100% inclusive of everything that we're dealing with, but it is a highlight of some very important projects that we've been pushing along the way that's going to help alleviate, well, we might not be able to prevent the flood, we might prevent the disastrous consequences of the flood. That's what we're going for, okay? And also to hopefully alleviate some of the flood insurance issues that we'll be dealing with down the road. So with that, are we ready to go to the update? All righty. So this is the update for winter of 23 and 24. And you remember the 2016 flood. You know, what's been done since. And again, it's not going to be 100%, but it's going to be significant things, okay? What remains to be done, and that won't be 100% either. And while we're still at risk of a devastating flood event, and just a comment about the lady standing in the middle of the river, this was back July the 4th of 2020, and Harold reported today at the same spot she's standing right now, the water's like 2 feet deep?
2 feet deep, yeah.
2 feet deep.
Outboards have to idle through with their motor trims up, and they bump in the bottom. So
Right.
That was yesterday. My son brought a large outboard up from Sycamore to his home on the bayou, and downstream of Rotary Point and upstream of Rotary Point, his depth gauge is showing a foot.
Yeah.
And that's of course that means the water is really about 18 inches, and he's turning a 16-inch prop, so. He has to idle through, and he's stirring up mud the whole way. So the Vermilion is supposed to be navigable all the way to the General Mouton Bridge. It is absolutely not navigable.
Right.
And it's a shame that the Corps has a responsibility to maintain navigability. That's one of their primary missions, and why they haven't gone to do that, I don't know. Flood control is secondary to their main mission, but navigation is at the top. They spend more money on navigation, mega millions on navigation, 400-500 million a year.
Right.
On the Mississippi. We got 70 million to dredge the Chafly River of Little Morgan City. That was a waste of time. It filled in again. We got 30 million to dredge to Calcasieu. So look at how much we had got for flood control. I don't know if we got any at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I suspect that if Test Vermilion Freshwater District wouldn't be pumping, that the river would go down in a few days to the point where there would be no water in the river. You'd be walking across a sandbar with no water in the river at all.
Yeah, when that wind changes, shifts, the front comes through, it goes to small craft warnings out of the north. That river, if we weren't pumping, I think the river would go dry.
Right. All right, you want to give us the next slide? Here we go. You know, these are our guiding principles about when we make a project recommendation, first thing we want to do, we don't want to harm anybody. And then we want to maximize the potential for overflow swamps as natural floodplains. And a couple of things we're going to talk about today are do exactly that. And removing obstructions to flood flows, okay, such as the shoals at Coulee, such as the trees that were in the river.
In the biotech.
Yeah, and a couple other projects in St. Martin Parish. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about diverting flood waters where it's possible to do that. Don't let the flood waters come down here to Lafayette in the southern part of the watershed. If we can divert it into the Atchafalaya River, the Red River north of us. And then a lot of these projects improve water quality and wildlife habitat. And we'll talk about that on one of the projects we just completed last summer. Very significant project. It should increase the water quality. It has increased the water quality tremendously in Henderson Lake. And then we need to establish a formal watershed level flood management team. When there's a flood, we need to have a coordinated response to a flood threat. Next slide, please.
I gotta get out of the program and go find it and come back to it. So we'll be doing that all night.
All righty. Okay, just to remind everybody, we've been in a severe drought for the last 2 years. And you can see in the United States, what area of the United States has been in the most severe drought. Looking at this particular slide right here, Louisiana, for the most part, it has been under a severe drought for 2 years now. So that's why you haven't seen any, major flood threats in the last 2 years. This drought image was of October 31st of 2023. That severe drought is alleviated somewhat, but we're still in a drought as of today. So can we go to the next slide, please?
Okay, let's try something different.
All right, just to remind everybody how important this work is. This is an example of my flood insurance projections for how much it's going to cost for flood insurance at my house. And I'm right on track. I think when I did this projection was in 2023, and I estimated my 24 premium to be $919, and that's what it was. Okay, and this is based on FEMA's. This is based on FEMA's strategy to raise rates 18% per year until they reach what they call full risk premium. So in other words, whatever that risk is, whatever the private market would charge you for the insurance with no subsidy, their intention is to raise those rates to that. And you can see that for my home, which I buy the maximum 250, 100 coverage, their premium would be $4,077 a year.
Wow.
Now that's pretty high. If you throw in your homeowner's insurance, on top of that, insurances are pricing a lot of people out of the market in Louisiana. Next slide, please. Okay, just to remind everybody, one of the things we're going to be talking about is Catawba up north of us. And Catawba's got a couple strategic goals regarding managing the water in Catawba. That's going to alleviate a lot of the water that comes down from the northern part of the watershed. Just to remind everybody, our watershed drainage starts north of Alexandria, and every bit of it has to come down here. Now, we might be able to divert some of it to Lake Henderson.
Only during flood conditions.
But at this time, we can't really divert hardly any of it to the rivers. Now, there's a couple projects going on to allow that, but none of them are in place as of this time. So basically, all your water from central Louisiana comes down It's got to be handled by the Vermilion River to Bayou Teche, Bayou Amy, or it's got to go into Lake Henderson. That's about the only way you can get water out of the watershed to get it down to the Gulf. All right, next slide, please. All right, this is one of the places we've been focusing on. Bayou Catawba used to drain to the Atchafalaya River. We're working on a proposal to restore the connection. We're going to be talking to the Corps of Engineers March the 17th in Morgan City about doing exactly
March
that.
7th.
March the 7th, I'm sorry. March the 7th, Morgan City, they're going to be having public hearings there. We have been talking to them in the past about that, in recent past. They're doing a study on Bayou Catawba, Rivers of the U.S. study. And we spoke to the people at the Corps that are doing that study about reconnecting the Bayou Catawba. If you look at that diagram up there, the channel on the right side, there's two channels that can sort of connect to the levee. Well, they really don't connect anymore. They broke it. They broke the connection to Bayou Catawba, which is the top channel. The lower channel is the Grimmett Canal that takes the outfall for the gates that they put there. Originally, there was no gates. Originally, there was no levee, okay? So they built the levee when they built the West Atchafalaya floodway back in 1935.
Yeah, they finished in 35.
And they put some weirs, overflow weirs there to maintain a level in Bayou Catawba. They had some unintended consequences with that original design, some severe unintended consequences. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the other end of Bayou Catawba. They totally blocked it there with there's not a gate. There's never been a gate put there. And this is what we want to reopen all the way to, you can see it originally connected to the Atchafalaya River. Okay. So just to give you a little teaser here, during the 2016 flood, if this connection would have existed, the water on our side up there was like at 22 plus feet.
Yep.
And the only reason we know it's 22 plus is as high as the gauge would go. It was higher than that. We don't know much higher.
Well, looking at dead leaves and floats them up in the trees, we figured it went at least 10 feet over the 18-foot weir.
So it's probably 28.
28 at least.
28. And the river was what?
At 8.
The river was 8.
Yeah.
So you had a 20-foot head across the floodway, which is only about maybe 7 or 8 miles if you follow Bayou Catawba.
About 7 miles.
So we'd have dumped the whole flood
Yep.
from central Louisiana into the river if there'd have been a connection.
We'd have easily lowered water Lafayette 3 feet.
Yeah. We'd have
That would
saved
be
a lot of
different.
houses in
Yeah.
Lafayette.
Yep.
All right, can we go to the next slide, please?
We'd have saved most of them.
You can just stay on the slides. Okay, and the unintended consequence when they built that floodway, they built it after the 27 flood, just to remind everybody, in 35 they built this floodway which blocked Bayou Catawba entirely. There was no gate. In 1940 we had a 7-foot flood in Lafayette here higher than 2016, 7 foot higher than 16. And then in 43 there was another one, and then 47 a third one. So in the space of 7 years we had 3 major floods, and they also said, well, we must have did something wrong. So they came back and they dredged the Vermilion and then the 1950s. And by the way, that's the last time there's been an end-to-end dredge, okay? And they put those floodgates there to let water out of Bayou Catawba into Lake Henderson. And we went all 69 years after doing those 2 projects before we had another major flood that was equal to something like in 1947, okay? Even with all the development, with all the lack of maintenance, those 2 projects handled things for a long, long time, but it's time to go back and revisit it and do some maintenance and then think about what changes we can make to really fix this problem. Next slide, please. All right. We have proposed a gate between Bayou Catawba and Bayou Amy, okay? Bayou Amy is the borrow pit along the levee, right on the west side, or the left side of the levee. You can see where the levee is at and the gate. There is no significant gate. There's a little small 54-inch gate to allow fresh water in Bayou Amy.
Yeah, maximum 200 cubic feet per second.
Right.
Very,
So-
very small.
Very small, okay, so, what we want to do there is put a larger gate to allow a lowering back a tablet by 2 feet when there's a threat of an impending storm, okay, like a hurricane or tropical storm or stall frontage. Want to be able to lower that in 48 hours. So we've got the project done, DOTD and RAB Levy Board has done a project to model that, to size that gate. So it's just a matter of designing the gate from that data that they've collected and model they developed, okay? So what that'll do, that gate will give us another tool in our toolbox of flood management. It'll also provide a more adequate freshwater flow down Bayou Amy. So there's a sugarcane mill that discharges, that's out of there, into the Bayou Amy complex, and really bad water, and by being able to push more fresh water down there, should alleviate that problem. So it's gonna be dual purposes. Again, it's one of our guiding principles, is not just flood management, but water quality, quality for fisheries and hunting. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, there's a pipeline across the floodway.
Built in 66.
Right, and they put a pipeline canal, and they laid the pipeline in the canal, and they didn't backfill the canal. And they had spall banks on both sides of the canal, and those spall banks got all plugged up. We noted that working with St. Landry Parish, St. Martin Parish, and CPRA. We identified that project and got the funding, and CPRA went out there and they opened up those gaps in the spall bank.
They did it, not just opening it anywhere, they reestablished crossings where natural streams went across the pipeline. That's a critical difference.
Natural coulees went across.
Natural coulees.
Coulees
went
and
across.
bayous.
They
You want to go to the next slide? We got a
reestablished
picture of that.
from those natural coulees.
Next slide, please. There's a picture of one of the gaps that was reestablished right there. Okay, so if you can see behind the gap, back into the swamp, there was a bayou there. Okay, that was plugged up. So I think they made 25 of these type of openings
Yes.
in that spall bank, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And we've gotten reports from people that fished the Henderson Lake, that the water there looks way better now than it used to, because it used to have stagnant water trapped behind those spall banks. Stagnant water that was so bad when it would be released, it would lead to fish kills and such, okay? So now the water is good. Wife and Fishers was very ecstatic about this project also. So our objective is to transform Lake Henderson into a world-class fishing destination, and we're well on our way of doing that. You want to, next slide, please. Okay, the Joe Dade Canal in Cypress Island Swamp is a drain that drains that whole area that has some connectivity to the Vermilion River, okay? And it allows connectivity through the swamp, and it allows, by clearing that out, it will allow that canal to lower the levels in the swamp to increase the retention of the swamp. And when a flood begins to form, to initially take some of that initial flood flow and send it down to the Bayou Teche rather than having to send it to the Vermilion River. Next slide, please. There's a picture of the Joe Dig after it's been cleared and snagged, and you couldn't see down. It was so bad, so plugged up, you couldn't see down this bayou, this canal. And this canal is actually a series of some old bayous and some
Yeah,
straight dug canals.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And you can see on the left side, that where they cleared a spot where they put the spoil where they dug it out and restored the channel in the canal.
That's a very important connection because this drains Cypress Island to Lake Foss Point, a distance of about 15 miles, in much deeper channel than the Vermilion Bayou. That has to take the water from Cypress Island to Vermilion Bay on a 55-mile trip on a very small waterway. So this allows Cypress Island to drain much quicker, which is very important because as long as it stays full, we're very susceptible to a flood during that period when it hasn't drained. So this is a very important issue. Thanks St. Martin Parish. They've done this on their own nickel, and it was recommended by the Corps after the 1993 flood. But finally, we got around to doing it. It wasn't an expensive project. They had talked about putting a gate, but they just opened it up and they connected the two bayous, the Cypress coulee, and I guess there's another coulee that comes from Broussard. They connected those two into a link with the Joe Day Canal that drains, it gives us another drain out of Cypress Island.
Yeah. I think it actually connects to Bayou Tortue too, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so, and Bayou Tortue comes out by the airport down there, so
Yep.
this allows a big hydraulic connectivity for the whole swamp
And,
by opening this up right here.
and we measured the flow back with, a few months ago when a high water, the last high water I think we had back in the summer, and the Vermilion was flowing at about 1,000 cubic feet per second, and this was flowing almost at 500. So that's a significant difference.
Yeah, so, and again, I mentioned that we're not 100% inclusive of everything that needs to be done. And south of here on the Bayou Teche, we know there's obstructions on the Bayou Teche that need to be the same sort of thing that was done here with the Joe Day needs to be done along the Bayou Teche. They need to pull the big trees out, just like we did on the Vermilion River in Lafayette Parish a couple of years ago. They need to do the same thing on the Bayou Teche, because that water's got to go down the Bayou Teche when
Yeah.
it comes out of this canal, and those trees are right now holding that water back. So you can see it in the gauges.
Yeah,
So whenever there's a flood, you can see those gauges rising south of the Keystone because the bayou's not taking as much water as it should take.
you'll have a giant water oak tree that's 150 feet tall all across the Bayou Teche that's 200 feet, so it virtually blocks the whole bayou.
There's two of them
And-
like that, that's
Yeah,
from what I understand.
and it catches other debris and it essentially forms a hydraulic dam.
Right. And we tried to get that tree removed, and between me and Harold, we talked to
The Coast
the
Guard.
Coast Guard, the Corps of Engineers, the state, the parish. Nobody wants to take responsibility for doing it.
Yeah.
And which is ridiculous. And I don't understand why you spend $2 million on this Joe Day Canal project and you don't go spend $30,000 and pull those two big trees out of the river. Or maybe not even that much.
Yep.
Yeah. Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But we need to get it done. We can't neglect our tributaries that carry water out of our watershed for years and years. I tell a story when I do presentations. The Bayou Teche on the northern end, when I was a kid, my dad was a Corps contractor and a state Louisiana contractor, did this kind of work. And we cleared and snagged the bayou test like this, exactly like this, pulled all the stuff out, up there around, did some of Bayou Fusilier too, around Arnoldville. And, that's the last time it's been done. And that was like over 50 years ago. So we can't go forward in our state, and this problem exists not just in our watershed. We cannot go forward neglecting these tributaries. We have to do maintenance on them. Next slide, please. All right, this is another St. Martin Parish project. They did it on their own. They dredged Catahoula Lake down in Catahoula, Louisiana. There's an obstruction to the flood flows that come through Catahoula Lake. Catahoula Lake takes the water from the northern part of the watershed that goes over the weirs up there by Catawba, and it runs through Catahoula Lake and it goes on to Lake Falls Point. Okay, so the parish had recognized there was a obstruction, actually to the point there's an island. There was an island that formed in the lake. It was so plugged up. So they got a dredge boat out there on their own, and they went and found some sugarcane property and leased it from the landowner, and they pumped mud in that sugarcane field, which will consolidate, and I'm sure they'll go back to growing some really good sugarcane. Now they got all that silt out of that lake, all that good fertile dirt, and put it on top of that field. Next slide, please. There's a picture of the little dredge boat they did it with. We had recommended Lafayette Parish to take a look at this dredging operation here, gave them the contact information of this contractor. This is a very small dredge that can get under the bridges we have in Lafayette. And in those tight spots where we would have to be opening bridges, like around Pinhook Road, we think that rather than having to barge spoil, this is a hydraulic dredge where the spoil can be pumped in a floating pipeline. They establish a floating pipeline, and they use pumps that pump a slurry of mud that they dredge up and water to the disposition site. The parish is going to be dredging, or the parish was going to be dredging those shoals, those bad shoals around Rotary Point, like where the young lady was standing in the picture. But there's some new news on that particular project. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But anyway, these little micro dredges are an option to be less intrusive of a project where you're not having to open and close bridges to allow for barge traffic going up and down the river, hauling spoil out of the river. Next slide, please. Okay, this was a project that was proposed to LCG to clear and snag the Vermilion River at Rotary Point. The clearing and snagging of the river has been completed as far south as the Cooley-Illicon, which is the northernmost intersection of the river with Vermilion Parish. And I was recently on a boat trip down there with Test Vermilion Freshwater District in December, and it's really a good job north of Illicon. Very, very few trees. Bayou Vermilion District has been removing trees that have fallen in the river since then. So this goes back to our first recommendation is we got to get these trees out of the river. And Bayou Vermilion District has the equipment to remove an occasional tree, but not to go out and do a major project like the parish did in preparation for dredging the river. Okay. So anyway, the spot dredging project may be on hold. We'll get to that in just a minute. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. All right, this is where they were going to do the spot dredge. the dark areas in this map was generated by Finstamaker, where the severe shoaling was, okay, or exists. And this is around Rotary Point, both north and south of Rotary Point. And again, this is where Harold said they went through there, that was today?
Yesterday,
Yesterday?
yeah.
Yesterday with a boat, where you had basically 18 inches of water.
Yep.
Wouldn't have any water, wouldn't be pumping. So we can't drain our watershed with a tributary that's compromised like that. We just can't do it, okay? So why did those shoals form right there? We think it's the concrete coulees. The concrete coulees that dump into the river carry sediment. They're self-cleaning.
It's self-scouring.
They scour themselves out.
No sediment stays in the coulee,
Right.
and they, high speed, they move at 3 or 4 miles an hour, and then they have a steep grade. And the Vermilion, of course, has a very shallow grade, so that water comes screaming out of a concrete coulee and carrying a lot of sediment, which can't stay in the concrete coulee, lands in the Vermilion and fills it up.
Right. And as an addendum to this discussion, this is exactly where the Corps of Engineers did a spot dredge back in 1997 after a near major flood in 93. Y'all may remember
They
93 we
flooded
had
a lot of homes. They went to 15.7.
15.7, we had about 500 homes flood, maybe 700.
Yeah, at least 500.
Yeah, we had 500 homes flood in Lafayette. I remember that well. It was serious enough that action was taken after that. A study was developed after that flood of 93 by the Corps of Engineers,
Yep,
and they had recommended enlarging the river and dredging it end to end
that's right.
as part of that study.
They recommended taking this Keystone Dam out, opening the Joe Dag, making that connection.
And they recommended
And-
taking small banks out
That's
in the
right.
Cypress Island Swamp.
Yep,
The infamous small banks that Lafayette Parish removed, or partially removed, I should say, that was in the Corps of Engineers report after the 93 flood,
Yep,
that you need to remove those small banks, okay? So, anyway, they've been removed. May not be the end of the story, but they've been removed. Next slide, please. Okay, and the Spall site, on the right side of the slide there, that is right upstream of the Hilton. Now, the negative about this is originally they were looking at barging that stuff up there, and you got the Pinhook Bridge in the way. And that would be massive, massive traffic disruptions.
yeah,
So we were asking them to take a look at a little dredge like that one we showed in that picture where they did Catahoula Lake to pump that Spall up there. Now, I understand there was some holdups in the permit that was applied for over a year ago with the Corps of Engineers about this project because of some wetlands over there at the Spall disposition site.
it is in wetland.
Yeah. So, some of it's wetland. So, anyway, in talking to Representative Higgins' office in the last week or two, some news about this particular project. There was in the work plan for this year, an end-to-end dredge of the Vermilion River all the way from the Lake Martin Road
Yeah,
Bridge down to the Intercoastal Waterway, which I think we have that in some slides coming up here. And being there's been a delay in this permit right here, Higgins' office was suggesting that instead of the parish spending the money on doing this job, and then the Corps coming behind them, and doing a major job, if we in fact are gonna get this major dredge job on the table this year and working on it this year, to defer doing this and just let the Corps take it out when they do the major dredging project. So you wanna go to the next slide, sir. Okay, now, after they cleared and snagged the river, we were monitoring some data, and they put a gauge down at Woodlawn Bridge, and since then they've actually put another gauge at Milton. Okay, and we had one event, and I can't see the date right. I think it was in 23, maybe August of 23, where the river came up pretty good, and what we were looking for was, due to this clearing and snagging, was the water being conveyed better down the river than it was before. And we believe that the water was being conveyed better because the normal differential, you see the two lines are separated. One of them is E. Broussard, the bridge on the gauge at 733, Louisiana 733. E. Broussard by the Rock Yards, and the other gauge is down at Woodlawn, which is halfway between Abbeville and Lafayette. So when those two lines converge during a high water event, that's telling us that the water is at least moving downstream as much as it's moving downstream better than it does during just normal conditions when there's lower, smaller currents. So we think that clearing and snagging has helped some. It's going to take some more data. We've been working with the USGS to get all these gauges put on the same reference. At the time this graph was done, it was not on the same reference. So all we could do is look at a differential. We couldn't look at absolute numbers. But after prodding the USGS for about a year, we finally got these gauges put on the same reference, so we can compare apples to apples rather than apples to oranges. Another thing with that Milton gauge is they put a flow calculation on that, and that's going to be tremendously beneficial to analyze any work that's being done regarding the Olicon, because the Olicon is the big culprit south of Lafayette proper, down at the parish line between Lafayette and Vermilion, on the parish line on the west side anyway. And what it does is when there's a flood going on in the Scott area, that watershed on the Olicon just dominates the Vermilion River, and it blocks the drainage from Lafayette proper, which is a situation we cannot stand, because when it's like dropping a dam in the river at the point that flood is happening in Scott. So it's essentially transferring this flood in Scott down to the Vermilion River. Okay, next slide, please. Here's one that we just went out and looked at today. We've been talking to DOTD for a long time about establishing connectivity between the east side of the Cypress Island Swamp and the west side of the Cypress Island Swamp. Okay, and there was a culvert there under the road that was very much compromised and marginal. And what happened was that it was plugged by debris to the point they had to put a grate on there. And so it wasn't working very well to move water when a flood was happening in Lafayette to the east side of the swamp. So the road, in fact, was acting like a dam. Now keep in mind, along the river, you got a high bank normally, okay? Along the river, back when they dredged it back in the 50s, they put the spall along there so it acts like a levee there. So whenever the water does jump out of the river, we want to make sure that water can normalize itself across the swamp, okay? But because the fact that the connectivity between the east and the west side, in a lot of cases, was the river itself, and with high banks along both sides, they were inhibiting the ability for the water to move to this lower area of the swamp on the east side. So when DOTD redid the highway, Louisiana 353, to Lake Martin, a road which was in really bad shape. We've been talking to DOTD engineers in charge of that project that, hey, we needed to put a big culvert there, and he agreed with that. He said he wanted a culvert that wasn't gonna get plugged, so he put a big one. And we got a picture of it here. Next slide. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention, but there's Harrell estimates it's 7,000 acres of low land. The coulee upstream of the culvert was cleaned out as part of this project. This was done by Fournette Farms, so we had some private investment in this project also.
And St. Martin.
St. Martin Parish and DOTD, okay? So this is basically a joint effort by these three parties to fix this problem, okay? And you can see the water in the coulee there. And guess which direction that water was running? It was running east this afternoon when we were out there. So that tells us there's connectivity between the river and that coulee.
And the connection is probably at 5-foot elevation, 6, 7 feet at the Surrey Bridge. So it's coming into play very early in a river rise.
In a flood situation. Yeah, we were talking to the farmer out there, and he said that when the river gets 8
feet.
8 feet or so, it's roaring through there, and it's going into that low 7,000 acre swamp area on the east side. So this is tremendous benefit right here. Let's see, the next slide may be a picture of the culvert. No, you must have skipped a slide. Can you go back?
Stand by. I gotta bring y'all back.
All right, that's no problem. There's the culvert, just to give you a feel for it. Now, it had a fair amount of water in it there, so the culvert, I think, is 6 feet high and 10 feet wide.
8 feet wide.
8 feet wide,
6 by 8,
okay.
48 square feet.
Right. So that's a big hole under the road there, and it'll allow a significant amount of water from the east side. So think about this. When there's a flood going on and the river's flowing north, okay, some of that water can come through this culvert and go to that low area swamp on the east side of the Lake Martin Road.
It's
like
7,000 or 8,000 acres of swamp that was not in the retention area that should have been helping the flood situation for Lafayette. Had that been in play during the 2016 flood, we probably would have lowered water maybe a foot and a half. That's the guesstimate, but a foot would have saved 73% of the homes. So a foot doesn't sound like much, but it's an enormous difference when it comes to flooding homes.
So this is exactly the kind of projects that we have been recommending. This is a low cost that uses natural retention. Can you imagine what it would cost to develop a 7,000 acre retention pond?
Yeah, but that you can put 10 feet
Versus-
of water in, so it's 70,000 surface acre feet. That would have made a very big difference in the flood of 2016.
What's the elevation of the road there, Harold, do you know?
It's at 14.
14, but we did get to 15. in there in the
There's a foot
2016
over the
flood.
road.
Yeah, foot over the road, yeah. So anyway, this is a big success right here, just like the Dixie pipeline, to allow water to move in the right direction. So next slide, please. Okay, and this is the project I was referring to. We must have jumped over one too at the headwaters.
Stand by. Go back.
Yeah. It's going to be a slide with the beginning of the dredging project. Yeah, they're going to start this dredge right there close to where this culvert's at. right there where the bridge is over the river on the Lake Martin, road. There's a USGS gauge there. It's a good proxy for the swamp, for the level in the swamp, because the water does back up to there. And actually the water runs north all the way up there past that when there's a flood going on in Lafayette. So again, that's where this culvert we just showed you comes into play. And of course the infamous fall bank is that highlighted line right there to the east of the airport. So when the water from Lafayette starts dominating the river and the river's running north, the idea again is to allow water to access the lower areas of Cypress Island Swamp. Okay, so we took that culvert, plugged in a big area of the swamp into the flood management that we didn't have before, or we had minimal use of before, I should say. All right, anyway, back to the dredging. This is where the Corps of Engineers is supposed to start this dredging project. And go to the next slide. And this is down by Intercoastal City at the Intercoastal Waterway. This is supposed to be it's supposed to be a $50 million allocation in their work plan. If you want to be proactive as the public, you may want to call Representative Higgins' office and ask him about this. Because if they can hear from it from more people than just Dredge the Vermilion and our board members, if they can hear from the public, it would really help tremendously. They'll put pressure on the Corps of Engineers to move this thing forward as soon as possible. All right. And next slide, please. And just why are we doing this? Western Louisiana coast is our best bet for South Louisiana. If you go to the eastern side, the eastern Louisiana coast, there's no more high land left. The only high land left is along the Vermilion River, the Mississippi River and the Bayou Lafourche. At least here, we have a little high land left. So if we're going to protect our culture and the livability of South Louisiana, this is the best bet. We've got to do what we can do to protect the western Louisiana coast and make it as livable as possible. Protect it from floods, protect it from hurricanes. We need to do this work. Next slide, please. Well, go back to we must have jumped over one. One of them that says eastern Louisiana. It's right at the end. It's right next to that last one you just showed with the overview of the coast. That's western. There should be one like that says eastern Louisiana coast.
Second to last slide.
There it is. Okay, if you look at that, you can see the only thing on the east side that's left is along the Mississippi River and the Bayou Lafourche. Everything else is gone. It's either swamp or marsh.
Yep.
It's not very livable.
And it's washing away.
And it's sinking into the ocean, So there's not a lot of hope for this. They can try to protect it as much as they can. They sure spend a lot of money on it. But the reality of the situation is when you dam off the Mississippi River and you don't allow overflow to rebuild the land, same thing on the Bayou Lafourche.
It was always washing away, but it was building much faster.
Faster than it's washing away.
Now it's not building at all, it's still washing away.
And it's sinking. It's sinking. So with that, you can go to the last slide. It's got the call-in phone number if anybody wants to talk about these things. We got a few minutes left.
That's the last slide, Western.
Oh, or maybe go back to the video. It's got the call-in number on it. There it is. So, if public has any, comments or call, suggestions or whatever, call-in number is 337-366-8950.
One of the things we're pushing for involves a gate at Bahia Tabla in these big 500-foot weirs. There's about a 16-foot head difference there, and a gate there could make a big difference in draining the swamps that they keep flooding with the pumping program with Vermilion. And these swamps are the Buff Kokoda Swamp, Thistleway Swamp, Darbon Swamp, and Waukesha Swamp. All together over 100,000 acre swamps that are always flooded. And of course, if the swamp should be dry, especially during the fall, so that when the rain comes, it's our natural retention. So it's super important. Let's see if we got a phone call. You on the air? Can we help you?
Did you hang him up?
No, I don't think so.
I hit the wrong button. Please call back if you
Yeah.
could, if you're watching this on TV. No,
Nope.
hang up.
I don't know if I'm operating phone.
I think you hit the wrong button. That's the hang up button, I believe. What?
You on the air? You on the air? Can we help you?
Yeah, when you were talking about the Dredge Canal, does that drain from the Cypress Island Swamp into Lake Falls Point?
Yes, it does, and it drains Broussard and Youngsville. See, Broussard and Youngsville doesn't drain to the south. It drains to the north into Cypress Island. So it's very important for those communities that we get that drainage established.
Right, right. The,
Well, when Ildacon goes north, that's draining us, Scott, and all of the southern part of the parish into.
Well, it's draining into Cypress Island because it's flowing backwards.
right,
Right.
Yeah,
And
unfortunately,
so
yeah.
that's got to go out through the Dredge. I thought you were talking about the jaws needing to be opened,
That's
able to
absolutely.
take all of that water.
See, the jaws is the main drain for the whole system into
the Gulf.
Cote Blanche Bay, and it's closed. And that opening traditionally was 200 feet by 40 feet. Now it drains into the intercoastal that is 150 by 12, so it's a much smaller channel. And the intercoastal is not designed to take the floods. In fact, it's causing a lot of problems. It's creating a hydro dam during the spring where even the tidal effect doesn't allow rainwater to drain the cane fields. So the cane farmers are fussing about it. So the Jaws is a very small $2 million project. It was probably created by a coastal restoration program operated by NOAA. It's one of these projects where they build levees across the bay and dredge holes that doesn't work very well.
Another unintended consequence.
Okay, but now you're doing this culvert that goes into the Cypress Island Swamp. It looks like you're just putting everything in the Cypress Island Swamp. How are we going to get it out of there to the Gulf?
Well,
Okay,
it goes out to
right.
Joe Dig, goes out to river.
Okay, it goes out the Joe Day Canal now to the low side of the Keystone Dam into Lake Falls Point. And it's only about a 15-mile run to Lake Falls Point, which is essentially at sea level, just like Vermilion Bay.
Right.
But it's 40 miles closer than Vermilion Bay. So we already see this making a big effect on how high Cypress Island is getting and how quickly it drains.
Right.
It is working quite well.
And when the water goes down in the river, it'll start going back south. So when the water turns south at Surrey Street in the river, it'll start draining Cypress Island then too.
Yep.
If we get those shoals out at Cooley Mean, we could drain it a lot quicker. Yeah, we could basically double the channel capacity. We have another call coming in.
Yes, sir. Thank you. You on air?
Hello there, Harold and Dave. Hey, listen, I did get a chance to catch all of y'all's initial talk on this thing, but
30 seconds.
one of the things that I really want to be sure that you guys point out the fact that we need an overall plan throughout the state where they can focus on individual areas of responsibility, but I think there needs to be a central thing for the state to where they can focus on the Chaffalaya Basin area and the drainage to that, so that things can be made, decisions can be made across the boundary lines of parishes to where it's not just a focus on individual things. So
We're
You're absolutely right.